All right, we want to evaluate or simplify the following expressions containing multiple terms using correct problem structure. So what we would do is we look at the composition of the expression and use that to help us keep track of what we need to keep track of. So first of all, when we read a problem, when we see it, I want to notice the two separate terms, looking for plus or minus outside. So this first problem in A has two separate terms. Each term needs to be simplified before we can evaluate it. So 7 is already done, but this term has two factors, -4 times -2. I need to multiply those together to get +8. So my two terms together then would be 15. I can finally combine the terms. So for part B, again, I'm looking for separate terms. I have 3 separate terms. Each of those terms need to be simplified before I can combine them. So simplifying any term in any order, -4 squared, this is a single term is +16. -3 times -4 is a +12. And then 2 is just a single term. So once I have my terms simplified, I can evaluate or put those together. 16 and 12 is 28. 28 plus 2 is 30. So the next problems for C, again, I want to work with the separate terms individually. So I notice there's 2 separate terms here. I want to simplify each of those terms by looking at the individual factors. So the first term is a factor of -1 and 5 squared, which is 25. So this term would simplify to a -25. So the second term has a factor of 2, and then a -3 is inside this grouping symbol squared. This would be a 2 times 9, or a +18. So once I have the two terms simplified, -25 and +18, I can put them together or combine them to a -7. So for D, same thing, I want to work with the individual terms. So there's a term split here and a term here. There's 3 terms. Each term needs to be simplified, so I'm going to look at the individual factors. The first term has 2 factors. It's 2 and the square root of 25, which is 5. So this term becomes a +10. The inside term, the middle term, and again, it doesn't matter which one we evaluate, but the middle term I see a factor of -1, and then the square root of -4 plus 8, the square root of 4. That'd be a -1 times the square root of 4, which is 2. This term, I can multiply the factors together. This term is a -2. So the third term has factors of 4 and the square root of 4, which is 2. 4 times 2 is 8. The last term becomes 8. Once all 3 of my terms are simplified, I can combine them together. 10 and 8 is 18, and then a -2 is 16. Okay, the last 2 problems. In E, I have a separation in terms here. I want to keep track of these separate terms as I work in here. So simplifying each of the terms, I want to recognize the factors. This first term is a factor of 3 and -2 squared, which is 4. 3 times 4, this term would become a 12. The next term has 2 factors. It has a factor of 5 and the square root of 9. So it would be 5 times the square root of 9, which is 3. This term becomes a +15 when I multiply those factors. The third term has a factor of -3 and the absolute value of -2, which is +2. When I multiply those together, I get a term of -6. Once my 3 terms are evaluated, I can combine them. 12 and 15 is 27. 27 and -6 is 21. So the same thing for here. I'm going to look for separate terms. I have a separate term here. The next term is right before the plus, and the next term is right before this plus. Now again, I can simplify these terms in any order I want. Some of the terms are pretty nice. These last 2, like the square root of 16, is just a term of +4. The square root of 64 is a +8. So I just want to keep track of those as separate terms. Let's go to the first term. This is two factors of -1 for the minus, and then a 4 squared, which is 16. So this term becomes a -16. The last term, I have a factor of 5 and the absolute value of -4. So simplifying inside that grouping symbol, this would be a 5 times +4. I have the factors. When I multiply them together, I get my term of +20. So again, I can simplify these terms in any order I want. So maybe I'll combine these two together. -16 and 20 is a +4. But then I got +8 and +4. 4 plus 8 plus 4 is 16.